welcome to the Augusta Civic Center and the annual meeting of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce and the first televised candidate forum of the 2014 campaign for Governor of Maine. The independent is ELIOT CUTLER. He is an attorney, a businessman, and a former staffer for Maine Senator Edmund Muskie. CUTLER has never held elective office. The Republican is Governor Paul LePage, who is seeking his second term in the Blaine House. He is a former mayor of Waterville and most recently worked as general manager of the chain of Martin stores across Maine. The Democrat is Mike Michaud. He is finishing his 6th term in Congress representing Maine's 2nd District. He is a longtime legislator and a former president of the Maine State Senate and a former paper mill worker in Millinocket. Please welcome the candidates. Over the next hour, I will be posing questions to the candidates. We won't be running a stopwatch on this, but we will try to let everyone have a say, and if things run too long, I'll step in to keep things moving. They will be allowed to engage one another. If someone makes a claim about them, they'll be able to respond to that. And if they get my attention, we'll make sure everyone has their say. This should allow us to have a substantive discussion on as many issues as possible. Candidates will be given an opportunity to pose a question to each of their opponents later in the hour. And each man will have 1 minute for a closing statement. The lots were drawn to determine the order, and wouldn't you know, it came out alphabetically anyway. And if you would like to be involved in the social media conversation, we'll also be live tweeting the forum in the next hour using the hashtag #MEPolitics. So let's begin. We are about to hire a leader for Maine for the next 4 years. ELIOT CUTLER, though you have run before, you are something of a mystery to some people here in the state of Maine. I'm not sure you've managed anything in the last 34 years that they could identify easily. So tell us why you should be the next governor of Maine.
First of all, thank you, Ben. Thank you to the State Chamber for having this debate. I appreciate the opportunity. I've spent a career in both the public sector and the private sector, managing businesses, starting successful businesses, working in the White House, working for Ed Muskie, helping to write America's environmental legislation, and helping to manage $160 billion of government spending. I understand management. I understand politics, I understand public service, and I understand the state of Maine. I grew up in Bangor, and my parents and my grandparents were in Bangor. I think that the next governor of Maine needs to have a vision for the state, a plan, and a strategy. I've written a book called A State of Opportunity that explains what I do and why I do it. We need someone who can take Maine into the 21st century, into a 21st century economy with 21st century ideas.
Governor LePage, the people of Maine have come to know you well over the last 4 years. One of the things they know is that you can be highly partisan and sometimes unwilling to work easily with those who disagree with you. Given that, why should you be the governor for the next 4 years?
Well, I think my critics say that, and unfortunately, we need less critics and more role models. And in the last 4 years, let's just take the last 2 years. And my opponents say that I don't work well with them. When you have good public policy, I work with you. If you try to get me to do bad public policy, it goes in the garbage. I don't have time. But let me tell you this. In the last 2 years, with a Democratic-controlled legislature, over 80% of the bills that came across my desk are now law. Out of those 80+%, 2/3 of them were sponsored by Democrats. On the other hand, of all the bills that I sent up to the legislature, 54% died in committee. Now, who's working with who?
Congressman Michaud, you have no actual executive management experience of your own to bring to this job. Why are you the best person to lead our state for the next 4 years?
Thank you very much, Pat, for having us here, and I want to thank the Maine State Chamber as well for hosting this event this evening. As most of you know, I'm not the most entertaining orator. I'm more of a listener and a problem solver. I've done that during my tenure in the Maine legislature as well as a member of Congress. The reason why I'll make the best governor here in the state of Maine is I have the vision that I laid out in my Maine Made plan. I have the experience working in the legislature on the Appropriation Committee as president of the Senate, the evenly divided Senate. and the 12 years in Congress. And I know how to bring people together. If we're going to solve problems here, whether it's working with the legislature, Republicans and Democrats and independents, or whether it's working with special interest groups, we're able to get the issue solved in the legislature. So I'd be a better governor, and I'd make a great governor for the state of Maine.
Governor LePage.
Yeah, I would just like to say that in the last 12 years as a congressman, you have voted 93% the way Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic leaders have asked you to vote. That's not that's not working both lines. If you look at what's happening in Maine, as much as you say that I don't work with others, 2/3 of the bills that went into law under your party's control, your party brought up.
Congressman?
Yes, I'm very glad that Leader Pelosi and my colleagues in Congress have been able to accept some of the ideas that I brought forward so I can actually vote for the bill. You look, for instance, under the Affordable Care Act. That was legislation that I was not supporting until we actually took care of the reimbursement rates under the Medicaid population. The cap and trade legislation, because the Maine has the REGI program. One of the issues I did with the cap and trade legislation, we actually were able to enhance what Maine has already been doing for quite some time. And it's about working across the aisle to get things done. It's not about making headlines.
Mr. Cutler?
Do you really want 4 or 8 more years of this? Really? If we keep arguing with each other in this state of 1,300,000 people, that's all, the size of greater Buffalo, New York. If we keep arguing with each other, which party's doing this, which party's doing that, who's a better partisan than the other, if we keep doing that, we are not going to pull ourselves out of an 11-year nosedive that Maine's economy has been in. Through 8 years of a Democrat and now 3, almost 4 years of a Republican. We don't need more of this.
Last word for Governor LePage, quickly.
Yeah. In the last 4 years, I've reduced the structural gap by 60%. Largest tax cut in Maine history. We've created 22,000 jobs. Wish it would have been 60. However, I couldn't budge one area, and that's energy. The Democratic Party is stuck in not reducing energy cost. Besides that, we paid off a debt to hospitals, $750 million. We never had to raise taxes. The last 2 years, we balanced the budget. We closed the year with a surplus. And incidentally, this last year, $94 million surplus. The tax increase by the Democrats generated $90 million. We balanced, we didn't have to take $90 million out of Maine people this last year.
Governor, let me ask you, and it jumps off of what you were just saying. You've said you want to focus on jobs that pay $50 an hour, not minimum wage jobs. Have you brought any $50 an hour jobs to the state in the last 4 years? Where are they, if they are, or if not, why not?
Absolutely. We've brought many doctors to the state of Maine that make much more than that. Jackson Lab right now, we were there this week, just in the last week. Just in the last week, I went the last 12 days, we've had over 12 ribbon cuttings. We've had over hundreds of millions of dollars invested in here, and we are currently working on some jobs that are going to be paying exactly that. With all benefits in, $50 is not a high-paying job.
Congressman Michaud, you have virtually ignored ELIOT CUTLER in the earlier debates you've had so far. Can you tell us why you think you'd be a better governor than him, and on what issue do you most differ with ELIOT CUTLER?
I think I'll be a better governor than my two opponents are up here on stage because I do have the vision on how to move the state forward in a very positive way. I have the experience, as I mentioned earlier. The governor talks about paying back the hospitals, but what he's not talking about is the fact that he used a credit card to pay them back. I would have paid the hospitals back, but it would have been cash. The thing that the governor doesn't talk about was the fact that because he's not accepting the expansion under the Medicaid, under the Affordable Care Act, hospitals are actually going to lose anywhere from $75 million to $100 million. So he's paying them back with a credit card over here. But the Maine Hospital Association said that
that's how you differ with the governor. That's how you differ with the governor. How do you differ from Mr. CUTLER?
Well, I differ with Mr. CUTLER because I do have the experience of being able to work across the aisle. Mr. CUTLER talks about what he would have done in his experience. He doesn't have a voting record. Now, I do have a voting record, and I do have that experience. And when the governor talks about the given the largest tax cut, but he's not mentioned, actually, when I was in the Maine legislature, we actually at that point in time gave the largest tax cuts in the state's history. The difference being is we actually paid for them. The governor never paid for them. What the governor did in his budget when he did those tax cuts, that the bulk of them went into effect outside the budget cycle, is he shifted the cost back onto the municipality.
Let's hear from the governor on that.
Okay. Number one, in 2001, when Congressman Michaud was president of the Senate, there were 0 tax breaks to business. In 2002, when Rick Bennett was president of the Senate, there were tax cuts given. However, right after the election, Governor Angus King called them in and repealed them, so they never took effect. Mike, I'm sorry, that is not true. Bingo. Number one. Number two, that when he says off budget, I don't understand. We've corrected him several times. The tax cut came in the 2011 budget, Mike. We paid it with revenues that new revenues that we're going to get in future times. I agree, but I don't understand the credit card. And if you were, I will ask you one question. If you were going to pay with cash, where would you have gotten the cash, number one? But let's talk about Medicaid right now.
Governor, let me interrupt for 1 second, because ELIOT CUTLER wants to get into this. The question was originally about him, so I do want him to have a moment to
I'd like to go back on Medicaid expansion.
Mike, I'm glad I don't have your record.
Me too.
You've crossed a lot of aisles. You've crossed a lot of aisles. You voted over 17 years, 19 times in the legislature against equal rights for all Mainers. And the last time, you were the only Democrat to join 4 Republicans in voting no on the day it passed. Is that an example of crossing the aisle? Is that really an example of crossing the aisle? Now,
Congressman, I think you want to respond. Actually, that deserves a response, I think. We'll get back.
Go ahead.
Well, I want to respond first to the governor on the budget. He doesn't understand how the budget... What the governor did was he did those huge tax cuts in one budget cycle. The effect of the biggest part of that tax cuts went in effect outside the budget cycle, so he didn't have to pay for them at that point in time. Then when it came time to pay for them, he eliminated municipal revenue sharing. That's that cost shifting that this governor has talked about. And I can understand why he might not understand that process, because he was refused to submit a supplemental budget to the legislature.
Well, let's get back to Mr. CUTLER is being critical of you, essentially, I think, for changing your position on several issues, including abortion, gay rights, and so forth. So how do you respond to that charge?
When I started in the Maine legislature, I was 24 years old at the time. And growing up in a large Franco family in a very rural part of the state of Maine. At that point in time, the reason why I ran for the legislature, it was because of the jobs, the economy, and the environment. I wasn't focused on the social issues. And since then, I've had a great opportunity, particularly in Congress, to hear the personal stories of women who had to make that personal choice, whether or not to have an abortion or not. And those stories really were heartfelt stories. And yes, I have evolved on that issue. But what is wrong with evolving? And you look at the LGBT issues. When they did a 30-year anniversary of Charlie Howard in Bangor, I went back, so they were going to interview me. And I went back and read the newspapers at that time. And the Bangor Daily News actually editorialized on the Charlie Howard murder. And it insinuated that he was asking for it. And you look at the stories during that time frame. And yes, the legislature did pass legislation, which I voted for that legislation. And at that point in time, the legislature, we thought we were moving forward in a progressive way. But come to find out, we really wasn't. And I know Mr. Cutler's upset because of Quality Maine and HRC, Planned Parenthood, and NARAL. They looked at my history of voting records, and I've received their endorsements because they know that I'm the candidate for governor that will run this state in an efficient way over the next 4 years.
Is it a bad trait for a governor to change his mind?
No, and I'm glad that Mike's evolved on women's reproductive rights and on so many issues that are core issues for so many people, but he's not being honest. He's not being honest with the people of Maine. He's pretending that he cast those votes when he was 24 years old. The fact is that he cast those votes when he was 24, 34, 44, and even 54 years old. It took him nearly 30 years to figure out why women feel so strongly about their bodies and about their rights. And he says he's the only person on this stage, because he said it before when we were on the same stage, who's ever cast a pro-choice vote. He's the only candidate with a record. Well, you know something? He's also the only person on this stage who's cast 27 years of anti-choice votes. He's the only person on this stage who voted to deny abortions for poor people when it was legal for others. He's the only person on this stage who voted to give a zygote personhood in the eyes of the law. He had to go to Washington to learn that he was wrong. Women didn't come to him in Augusta during those years and years and years when he was in the legislature.
Mr. Cutler, I'm going to have to interrupt. I do want to move on from here. And I have a question for you. You have criticized both of your opponents for taking money from special interests.
I have.
But your law firm, while you were senior counsel, took in lobbying fees from special interests such as Monsanto and Dow Chemical. How is the money you earned as a client different from money that Governor and Congressman Michaud are receiving for their campaigns?
You know, Pat, I didn't earn that money because when you're of counsel or senior counsel, you are paid a salary. You don't have a share in the partnership profits. And I never lobbied for any of those clients, never did any work for any of those clients. This was in a law firm of 900 people. What Mike was doing, and for that matter, what Paul has done, is take their money and then go vote for them.
Governor LePage?
I don't know.
You don't vote. Yeah, I'm sorry. You didn't vote.
I didn't vote.
No,
I didn't vote for you.
Water bill 50,000.
Are you beholden to special interests who have contributed to your campaigns?
You know, absolutely not. In matter of fact, this year someone was going to do a big fundraiser, and they came in and asked me to do something, and I said, "I'm sorry, but I'm not going to do that." I do not. I'm only beholden to one conscience. It's the one inside of me. I'm not beholden to anyone. I have a great senior staff. They give me great advice, and I take it most of the time, although there are times when I just say no because it's the wrong thing to do. Let me tell you how I look at things. Wrong is wrong, no matter if everyone's doing it. Right is right, no matter if no one's doing it. And I dictate my decisions solely based on my conscience and the direction I give from my staff.
Congressman Michaud, over your career, you've accepted a lot of special interest money. How has that affected you?
It hasn't. The bottom line for me, I've always focused in on what's the right thing for the people here in the state of Maine. When I first ran for the legislature, I ran to clean up the Penobscot River. And that was the very mill that I was working at. I felt strongly about being able to clean up the Penobscot River. As far as money, you mentioned Monsanto and some of the money they gave. I don't have the means to write my own check to run a campaign. So we have to do a lot of fundraising. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to vote the way those individuals wanted. For instance, on the Monsanto is a good example. I'm a co-sponsor of the GMO labeling bill, which Monsanto's absolutely against. My focus continues to be, and will always be, focusing on what's right for the people here in the state of Maine.
Mr. Cutler, is there an example you can give of,
Sure.
of the congressman voting for special interest instead of Maine's interest?
You know, in 2002, Mike, you began taking thousands of dollars from Monsanto's PAC. And in 2006, you voted for a bill, H.R. 4167, that would have barred Oakhurst Dairy's label that says no artificial growth hormones because Monsanto didn't like it and had already sued them in Boston to get rid of that language on Oakhurst's label because Monsanto makes artificial growth hormones.
Governor, do you have a last word on this? You seem to want to get in.
The congressman just made a comment, and I got to hold him to it. He said he casts his votes for the people of Maine. However, the people of Maine have enormously high energy costs. And just 2 weeks ago, he, for a second time, voted against H.R. 1900, claiming that which would have expedited energy of the expansion of natural gas in Maine. He's voted against it twice, and during that vote, he claimed that he did it because there was eminent domain issues in Massachusetts. There are no eminent domain issues in H.R. 1900. It's not even about eminent domain. And he voted against Maine people.
Congressman?
Yes, that's I'm glad you brought that up, Governor, because, first of all, you have no energy policy, number one. Secondly, I believe in natural gas as a good transitional fuel. And you are correct, in that legislation, it does not talk about eminent domain. However, under the legislation, it said they'd have to approve or deny the permit. And by doing so, what it would do was allow an out-of-state corporation to use eminent domain for that pipeline. That's under current law. It wasn't in the legislation, but it's under current law, Governor. And that's one of the things, when you look at legislation, you got to look at what might not be in the law, but the effect that it has outside the law. And the governor's just using this as a diversionary tactic because the governor's inability to work with the New England governors to deal with the expansion of the pipeline here in the state of Maine. And if we're going to have that pipeline, we have to work with other New England governors.
First, Mr. Cox.
This is going to surprise everybody. They're both wrong. Number one.
That doesn't surprise us.
Well, you got to listen to this, Mike. Learn something. Number one, the bill doesn't give a FERC licensee eminent domain authority. The FERC license gives them eminent domain authority. And number two, the real problem with the bill is that it gives the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, at the end of the day, the authority to make all of the environmental decisions, all of the other decisions that any regulatory agency has failed to make. And you know something? That's why Ed Muskie rewrote NEPA before it became law, so that the foxes wouldn't be guarding the chicken coops.
We need to move on. Governor, I want to ask you...
But there's an error here as well.
All right, quickly.
H.R. 1900 only deals with a pre-filing issue. It's just trying to streamline the process.
No. All right, we're going to move on. Let me ask you, Governor, yesterday in referring to a patient who was at Maine Medical Center in Portland who was being observed for possible Ebola symptoms, after this individual was released, you said the biggest issue right now is whether or not this individual has proper papers. What did you mean by that? Why is that the most important thing if someone may be hospitalized with an infectious disease in this state?
Because my concern is this. When there are three types of ways that a person can come to Maine and from a foreign country, foreign land, legally. And there's obviously, we all know, the ones that are illegal. You can come over as a primary refugee, secondary refugee, or an asylee. Primary refugee and the secondary refugees have medical assessments So we already know their medical condition. An asylee, we do not know. And an asylee, the first thing we want to know is, do they have a visa so that we have ways to get back to see if they have a medical assessment. And not everybody in Maine is here legally. As the good congressman will tell you, that he favors my position of not providing GA to illegals.
Congressman?
Any contagious outbreak like this one is a real cause for concern. When you look at what's happening in West Africa, they have a lack of their healthcare system. Maine cannot solve this problem alone, but Maine can actually play an important role in this issue. The first Ebola patient has shown up at the Dallas hospital with 103 fever at that hospital. Because he had no insurance, they gave him aspirin and sent him on his way. He had contact with 50 other individuals. The virus doesn't pick and choose who is infected. Our healthcare should not pick and choose who we care for. And the fact that this governor has vetoed not once but 5 times the expansion under the Affordable Care Act, that's reckless, it's wasteful, and it leaves us vulnerable. And that's why when you look at the whole Ebola issue, the reason why they were turned away is they had no insurance.
Mr. Cutler?
You know, I don't think any of us here are really worried about a particular individual. It may be that there was or was not a good health assessment made of this particular person. The real issue here is whether the state of Maine is prepared, under the guidelines of the Homeland Security Department, to deal with problems like this whenever and wherever they occur. And according to the department, we're not ready.
Governor?
Which department?
Homeland Security.
I beg to differ. We are in complete contact with the federal government, MEMA and CDC both. NEMA here and CDC in Maine and CDC at the federal level. If they've said that, you're the only one they've said it to. They certainly haven't said it to us, because I've been working with them on an almost daily basis.
We'll provide you with that.
Okay, thank you. Now, to go back to Mr. Michaud's comment about Medicaid expansion. Folks, we, along with myself, my staff, and Mary Mayor, the commissioner at DHHS, have been trying to tell the Maine people for a year now that not everybody qualifies for the expansion. Now, we have a letter from CDC, and I had it enlarged so that the camera can get it.
Props.
I would like the camera to read this. Therefore, parents between 100 and 133 who could be enrolled in the new adult group cannot qualify as newly eligible, and the newly eligible FMAP, which is 100% reimbursement, is inapplicable. Now, the point I try to make here is everybody says we're leaving money on the table. The fact of the matter is there's only about 20,000 people of the uninsured that can qualify for the 100%. Now, the other people, the majority of them, that are above 100% qualify for the exchanges. Now, this opponent tell me that we're leaving money on the table and hospitals are going to go broke. If they get insurance on the exchange, they get commercial insurance subsidized by the federal government, which is a much higher reimbursement rate than Medicaid. So if they go to the exchange, and we work at making sure that people at 100% or greater than federal poverty level, people will have commercial insurance.
Quick response on this, please. First from Congressman Michaud.
There are 70,000 Mainers who were denied access, of which 3,000 are veterans, because this governor had vetoed the bill. Maine will save over $600 million over a 10-year time frame. Hospitals get a $348 million, and over a 10-year time frame is $3 billion. And the fact that you're covering 70,000 Mainers, for those who do have health care coverage, it actually will help hold down the cost of health care.
ELIOT, CUTLER, quick response on this, please.
The hospitals want Medicaid expanded. The hospitals want you to take the money. These are your friends. These are the people whose debts you paid by selling the liquor business. Now, when they do go back into the red, and most
we brought the liquor business back in.
What? Fine. When you know exactly.
Just
when you see the hospitals in Maine, Paul, going back into the red, and most of them are already there, you don't have another liquor business to sell. Now, there's got to be a reason why the hospitals, along with so many thousands of Maine people, want us to take the expanded Medicaid assistance.
Gentlemen, that has to be the last word on this. We need to take a break. We will be back with more of our News Center Voice of the Voter coverage of the 2014 race for governor from the Augusta Civic Center and the Maine State Chamber of Commerce.
Tonight's Gubernatorial Forum is brought to you through the cooperation of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, Kaplan University, American Chemistry Council, Chinbro, Freddie Flaherty LLP, and Unum.
Good evening. I'm Dana Connors, President of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, and thanks for joining us. We've made progress, but Maine's economy still faces challenges. Predictable business regulations, high taxes, health care and energy costs, and a shrinking skilled workforce, just to name a few. This election will help determine how we meet the challenges facing us and shape our future in the years ahead. Tonight we'll hear three candidates for Maine's governor discuss their strategies for Maine's business challenges and the areas they see opportunity. Please listen carefully to what they have to say. We're looking for the best possible leadership for our great state. The Maine State Chamber of Commerce looks forward to working with our next governor to help strengthen our economy and advance our state. We're honored to join WCSH and WLBZ in bringing this debate to your home tonight. If you'd like to be a part of our effort, call us or visit our website. Join the Maine State Chamber of Commerce.
I love Maine, and I'm so happy to be back with the News Center team. And hiking my favorite trail. Hey, Todd. Hey, how's it going? Getting my go-to shake.
Welcome back, Todd.
Thank you. Wearing my Storm Center sweater. And remembering this view.
Hey, Todd, come on. We want to check out the Tide Pool.
All right, hon, I'm there, kiddos. And I'm so thrilled to be here.
Todd Gutner. He's back home on News Center.
Next, it's a crush-worthy night of television, starting with the mysteries of Laura, where her ex goes undercover.
I'm gonna kill him, then I'm gonna tap dance on his grave.
On an SVU event,
Wear your best.
a student goes on a rampage. We need to take our shot.
She'll get him to put the gun down.
And the Chicago PD. That'll keep you guessing until the very end. If you're into something, you need to tell me now. Woman Crush Wednesdays starts next on NBC.
Tomorrow morning, Jack Burke talks humor versus teasing. Plus, we'll have a recap of the first televised gubernatorial debate with Bill and Ethan.
Welcome back to our News Center Voice of the Voter Forum with the three candidates for governor, ELIOT, CUTLER, Paul LePage, and Mike Michaud. We're coming to you tonight from the Augusta Civic Center and the annual meeting of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. At this point, we will let the candidates take over the questioning for one round. ELIOT, CUTLER, if you have a question for one of your opponents.
I have a question for the governor. Paul.
Yes.
One of your TV ads boasts that you've recovered $1 million in welfare fraud. That's great. Now, I want to talk about corporate welfare. You made a deal with your pals at Cape Street Capital to give them millions in tax credits, state tax credits, so that they'd invest $50 million to save the jobs and create new ones at the East Millinocket Mill. And your press secretary called it one of the most significant achievements of your administration. 11 months later, the mill closed. More than 200 people lost their jobs. Great Northern is bankrupt again. Hundreds of Maine businesses in the towns of East Millinocket and Millinocket are owed millions of dollars, and Maine taxpayers are on the hook to write checks to Louisiana investors for $16 million in tax credits you gave away for improvements that were never made. Have you ever asked for an audit? Where is all the money? Where's the money? Are you afraid to ask where it is? Do you not want to know? Are you afraid to take on corporate welfare as strongly as you've taken on other welfare?
Let's let you answer the question.
The answer to your question is, I'm not afraid to take on corporate welfare. We are investigating the whole thing in Millinocket going back several years. But let me just answer one of your questions. $16 million. One thing that you're wrong, they did invest millions into the plant. So the plant infrastructure is actually more valuable today than it was. But that's not even where the real money is. Where the real money is, $40 million in payroll, $120 million in supply of wood, all the wood cutters, and we saved about $9 million in unemployment benefits. So, well, is it a good deal? No. Would I do it again? Yes. Because the net bottom line was, we're right now about $7 million out, but the Millinocket benefit was just short of $200 million.
You know, I've got to say, Paul, if I've been in Millinocket, I was there in April, I was there in September, I can't find anyone there who thinks it's a good deal.
Governor, do you have a question for one of your opponents?
Yes. I have, boy, I get so many.
For now, you just get one.
Well, it's a question that goes to both candidates. It's very simply this. There's a rumor out there, and I'm not sure if it's true, and I'm going to ask ELIOT. I'm told that the Democratic Party asked you to run as a Democrat before Mike Michaud announced. So my question is, to you, is it true?
Yes.
And to Mike is, how do you feel about that, Mike?
I am the Democratic nominee for governor, so they chose me.
All right. Congressman Michaud, do you have a question for one of your opponents?